Mike's over there. So I want to kick it off to the Q&As, but there was one question I had in mind that someone else had tweeted, which was, how is web video different from the traditional broadcast news? What's one thing that is completely different from your guys' approach? And yeah, let's just frame it like that. Let's go around the horn.
It's not scripted. We have actual reporters, not news actors. That's going to get me in a lot of trouble, but I figured
That's totally, someone tweet that out. Dun, dun, dun.
Couldn't help myself, sorry, set up.
Rebecca?
I think for us, we're trying to tell the story, usually using other kinds of visual cues and also using interactive graphics and things like that we think can tell a much more engaging story and not depending on talking heads to interpret the news unless they are our journalists that are out in the field.
Cool.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of differences. I think there's a big difference in just format and the way that it can be consumed and shared. So that on its own is a big difference. The flexibility that you have on online video in terms of length and model and is very different. And I think there's still a general expectation of quality when you talk about broadcast that doesn't seem to be there when you're sharing on YouTube. People are a lot more accepting of lower quality homemade things when you're sharing short online videos, and I think that's a significant difference there too.
So for us, aside from the whole presentation, I think two words, probably shareability and getting into the conversation point. So designing content that people want to share and start a conversation, not with us as a brand, but with the community about. And I think that's very important for us.
Great. So this is an international conference, and I got a tweet from Pedro who says, ¿Cuál plataforma recomiendan ustedes para países? I'm kidding, I'll translate. Which platform do you guys recommend people to use in countries that don't have, broadband or strong internet access? What do you recommend for people to connect in that kind of challenge in that environment?
There we go. Twitter obviously is the one that would stand out, I guess, just purely because it's not based around rich media. But if you're looking for a good media experience, YouTube invests hundreds of millions of dollars to actually optimize that experience into places where you don't have such great bandwidth. So that's a good place for rich media.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. From Twitter to YouTube to Facebook, I think all three have optimized it for web video consumption in ways that others probably haven't.
Let's start setting up questions. Let me do one more, or is the microphone already out there? All right, sir.
I'm Ken Martin with the Austin Bulldog here in Austin, Texas. I had a question for the New York Times. The unbridled access to Christine Quinn was interesting. It reminds me of something that I did 30 years ago when I wrote a big story about the mayoral candidate for a local magazine, and at the very last minute almost, we realized, wait a minute, there's another major candidate, and they need a story too. I was struck by your access to Christine. By the question, I didn't hear anything about covering of the other candidate who eventually won the election for mayor of New York. Was there no thought given to a documentary on him as well?
I don't know if I can actually answer that. Not because it's confidential, but I'm not sure would have the answer for that. I just know that we had thought about Quinn mostly because we were really inspired by her just potentially being the first woman and being the first gay woman to win this race, and that's why we were focused on her at that point.
Let me go to a Twitter question before we go one here. Someone tweeted, and maybe on the heels of the presentation before, how does the legacy video broadcast adapt into this new change? Can they do it? Do you see that innovation within the building?
So, I've had to move all the way out to San Francisco to do the innovation, and I think having that space has been good versus being in the corporate headquarters because it's given us a lot of space to innovate. A lot of runway,
would you say?
A lot of runway. But I think, I think for us it's going back to the drawing board, as I mentioned earlier. So what we're doing is we're completely going back and reinventing this digital-first experience. I think legacy brands can adapt to it, and it's kind of taking a product, as I mentioned, in terms of your audience. It's two different audiences. So it's two different approaches and strategies that you need to have there.
Daniel, you're not legacy, but you've got two very legacy stakeholders.
We're 5 months old, so
yeah,
I don't know how much legacy we have.
But your parents are of a different
Sure.
generation, if you will.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges there with them? Are they involved? Or?
Well, they are involved. They certainly want this to succeed, and so they are involved, to that extent. It's a balance. I think you are talking about legacy media that has strict standard and practices, for example, that they've adhered to for many years, and it's one of the tensions that you come across when you're talking to a much younger generation that accepts a very different language and a very different communication. It's kind of hard to adapt, to adopt the standards and practices, for example, of legacy media. And so there are certain tensions that we're going to have to work through as we move forward. But Fusion is very much a startup, and that's, to me, what was very attractive about the company also. We want to innovate, we want to experiment, we're okay with failing, we're okay with, pivoting and changing things out. And I think that, there's a real sort of startup energy there that I think is very exciting.
You guys were together for, was it about a year before it went public in October? Because I know folks that were working in Fusion for quite a long time, right?
Yeah, I only started a Fusion in December,
okay.
or in January actually, but yeah, it's been kind of, I mean, the original deal I think happened about a year and a half or so.
Rebecca, innovation inside the
New York Times? I think there's always great innovation happening at the Times. I mean, if you look at even just Snowfall, which now is about a year and a half, I think, old, but from the interactive team and all the interactive graphics that we do that are in museums now, I mean, we're always innovating in visual space, and I think we are getting a much higher tolerance for innovation, and I think, we think, I'm sure I'm quoting somebody else that actually said this, which is that you fail frequently and you just do it quickly and you move on to the next thing, and I think we're getting more and more inching along towards that perspective on how we're developing.
Great. And so you've acquired Storeful, but how does News Corp innovate from within as well?
I think it's a great question, actually. I think one of the ways it's important is actually the different teams within the organization working much closely together. Snowfall was a great example of that, where you've got product, editorial, business, advertising, all working together with a common goal of creating or innovating what we've done traditionally. When you get that sort of teamwork, things happen, and you'd be surprised how little that actually happens in organizations today, and the more it happens, the better we'll all be off.
Great. We had a question?
Over here, down in front. I have a question about Fusion. I'm Alex Avila from University of Texas at Austin. I was following the Fusion presentation with great interest, and then on the last video, you completely lost me. But you got people being goofy and acting, kind of dancing around, and it struck me as silly and ridiculous. I wouldn't want to watch that. So I have to assume I'm not part of your targeted audience, right? Okay. So my two-part question to you is, who is your target audience? I'm assuming young people, because that's what advertisers want. And what makes you think that is what they want? Because that is not, as you earlier said, low-quality homemade video. That's highly produced.
Yeah, so just to clarify that last point, when I was talking about low-quality video and high-quality video, I was just talking about people's acceptance of low-quality video and digital a lot more, and an expectation of high-quality video on a cable network. So that just that point. Look, you're not the demographic, so I understand if some of it might not resonate or seem. I'm sure you also see a lot of other news sites appealing to this demographic, and you probably think they're a little silly and not very serious, and they're doing really well with this demographic. And I think partly it's because this is a demographic that's very comfortable with, a foot on the deep and thoughtful and meaningful, and another foot in the sort of light and the levity and the fun. And they're very comfortable with that, even with one beat after the other, even all of it living in the same space. And I think media companies have understood that and exploited it to huge success. So that on the one hand, and then, a lot of what you see here, some, but not all of it, some actually gets a lot of traction online before we ever put it on our screen. So things that maybe, on first look seem like they might not be very successful or seem silly, actually have great success. And we're listening to our audience, and we're trying to really deliver on things that they want, and not try to sit in an ivory tower and pretend like we know what people want. Because this is an audience that reacts and lets you know what they care and what they like and what they don't. And we're really listening to them. We're really trying to pay attention to that.
Question over here.
I have a question specifically about live newscasts online, not live events or live streams of breaking news. But can you contrast or compare any analytics of actual views of the live newscast compared to archive views? Basically, what I'm asking is, how many people are intentionally getting in front of their devices at a specific time to watch a specific newscast as opposed to just watching it later?
Sure. So for us at the Wall Street Journal, I think the numbers are somewhere between 90 and 95% are watching VOD versus live. But what live allows us to do is give that immediacy on our homepage to users that do want to know in real time what's happening. It also helps us set the agenda when it comes to, say, our early morning shows for what to expect or what you've missed or what's going on at that point, that time. But it's also a means to end when it comes to incremental content creation. It helps us create clips of things that we want to talk about in a very efficient way. That's probably the two reasons I think how we look at live.
From our side, I think it's probably the similar ratio, but where we see massive spikes is during breaking news events. When there's breaking news, nothing can ever beat a live stream. When you're on the ground, that sort of raw footage, you see a massive spike, which kind of will sit there for a while, and then it kind of ties down after that, and then everyone will go back to the on-demand. So breaking news is big for us.
To add, in the book, he actually talks about that broadcast TV will still own live news events. He didn't say broadcast specifically, but live news events will still call the attention in these platforms. Question over here?
Yeah. Rebecca, I really admired the Dasani series that the New York Times did, and I thought it was interesting the way in which not only did the reporter do some video of her own, but she also gave it to the subject of the story. And I was wondering if that was something you were going to develop more, and then also the challenges, because I also saw, this is a story where the young woman wasn't identified, but the video was also, it was so intimate in a way that a print sometimes is not.
I think that story was very unique in that sense that, first of all, the person it was about had a screen in her pocket and has shot a lot of videos with her friends, and that's when you start thinking about, and somebody talked about it earlier about as this age is getting older, that they all have that capability. So I imagine there'll be stories where that becomes more and more possible.
Okay, I'm Beth Elderkin, and I'm a news actor, or at least I usually write what the news actors say. And so I kind of wanted to bring it back to that element of the conversation, because I use my iPhone for a lot of filming and editing. You can create everything on there. But at what point do you cross a line between being able to just use your iPhone and losing that sense of professionalism that you get with TV or affiliate or broadcast journalism? And at what point could we go into that area where it's like Chicago Sun-Times, laying off all your photojournalists because, hey, we have iPhones now. How do we keep that sense of professionalism that we've developed with broadcast journalism and move it into online? It's for really anybody.
I would suggest that we stop being so precious about that. I think that as long as the audience are accepting of other types of formats and they don't demand that quality, then it's okay to deliver it. I don't think we should be precious about things that our audience doesn't seem to be precious about.
I think the users are consumers will tell us what they want to see. I think there's a place for both. I think you're absolutely right. There's a place where shooting long form, in-depth, high quality journalism is just not possible with an iPhone. But you look at some of the coverage that I think the Times and the Journal did, and some other the New York Post and others did, covering the Harlem Fire from a couple weeks ago. The immediacy that and the authenticity that an iPhone gave some of our reporters the ability to shoot something that was good for us and consumers wanted to see was great. But I don't think we'd follow up the next day with just an iPhone to do an in-depth piece on what the after effects were. Put it that way.
I have a question. I don't know if you guys heard, but some crazy guy said that mobile is dead. So what, if anything, is your news organization doing to look at these emerging platforms of new technologies beyond the phone in your pocket, if anything?
Yeah, so I think one of the great advantages that we have, and one of the really fun things, is that we're building a news organization in a very different world from the world which saw the CNN and the Fox News and the MSNBCs come about. It's the power of, and it's been mentioned at length here, but when you have a news development, the amount of phones, the amount of cameras, the amount of people that are watching this develop, that are sharing, that are communicating, is incredible. So for example, watching the Venezuela protests and seeing the people shooting with their handhelds, hearing their voice, hearing the shake in the hand, it's an incredibly powerful thing. And so those are the things that we're thinking about as we build a very new news organization, and we're really thinking about how we can take advantage of that and really harness the power of the crowd in our news developing process. And I think that's a fundamental difference.
So from our side, like as I said, I was part of the new media team, which was focused on identifying future trends. We've just been renamed the Innovation Incubation Group at Al Jazeera. And one of the tracks that we're focusing on is wearable technology, that we're going to be focusing quite a bit on moving forward. So that's definitely a trend that we are looking towards. How do you reach people across different devices? I think that's definitely important.
We can nerd out together. A question came in through the Twitters. I'll just simplify it. Who's making money off video? Raise your hand.
Hi.
The one with the microphone.
Yes, sorry. Sarah Peralta, a recent graduate from Texas State University. My question's for Daniel. So obviously, I recognize the market opportunity for Fusion TV. Historically, Latino issues for all people of color have been underreported, not covered by mainstream media. So I think we can all agree on that. I think the question is, is it better to create a separate channel that focuses on this topic, or is it better for us as consumers, as people of color, to demand from mainstream media that they represent us? Because we are growing, and we're taking over this country. Or I shouldn't say that, sorry. Don't tweet it. And they should be covering, New York Times should be covering our issues. And I think there was a conversation on Twitter. Some young lady tweeted out about the diversity of the New York Times multimedia staff. Or the lack thereof. Yes, sorry. Yes, sir. So I think, for me, I see the value in us having our own representation, but can separate be equal?
So just to that point, I think one of the things that you're absolutely right in both points that you make. And I think that's something that we realized fairly early on in our research is, on the one hand, young Latino, second, third generation, they don't want to have a separate conversation from the rest of America. They don't want to be sort of having a conversation just as Latinos. They're young Americans, and they watch the NBA, and they watch the NFL, and they talk about these things, and they don't want to have a separate conversation in another network somewhere else, which is why we're not just for Latinos. The thinking, initially the idea for Fusion was to be that, but you're absolutely right. A, Latinos don't want to be part of a separate conversation, and B, media companies are not doing a good job of representing how diverse America has become. And so we want to be the mainstream cable network that acknowledges and represents how diverse America is.
This is the final question. Let it be fast. Got to be quick.
Robert, she already all the thunder out of my question, so I'm depleted. I'm going to ask you, Roberto, about the big elephant in the room. You're a freaking Latino.
Yes.
Right?
That's a check.
Yes,
es verdad.
a check. And you
Correct.
ask a simple question like that one that she's asking. How come these neighbors that are sitting next to you had don't devote 1 second of their time during the whole year to cover Latino issues in the manner that you would cover if you were in the field, not in the academy, sheltering because there is no jobs in the field. So my question to you is very simple. The emperor has no clothes. No, you have beautiful clothes, Roberto. But you have to say the truth to the face of these people. How come the Latino community, the up-and-coming Latino community of the country, 50 million strong, $1.5 trillion purchasing power, is not addressed by any of the networks? Fusion is trying to do something. Univision does the job, but partially, they need help.
Sure.
How come the New York Times, Fox Latino, and all these places, NBC
Okay.
Latino? So that's a simple question. You are a reporter, aren't
Simple
you?
question,
Okay.
definitely a simple question right there.
Why? The question is why?
I'm not going to answer why, but I can tell you my part as a professor. I'm training future journalists to include diversity, to bake it in. I'm not a special person because I'm Latino. I am an American, I am international, and so are you, and that's the type of journalists we're producing. And there are folks here doing the best they can, and if those that don't adapt will die. Just like technology, if they don't adapt, they'll die. If you don't adapt to diversity, you will die. So keep working and lead the way. Thank you guys. Give a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. We do have... Oh, my God. We do have more prizes. And then a coffee. And then we come back. We have a fascinating panel on how data has been used to know better about the readership.